Welcome to VitaFriends Voices, a podcast brought to you by Vitaflo, where we will share your stories. Each episode will bring you engaging interviews with inspiring individuals who are either living with a protein disorder or are experts at the forefront of their field. The focus of today's episode is phenylketonuria, or PKU for short. And our guest today is Annie, who will be discussing with us the concept of Move with PKU and the important research she is doing within this area. So Kit, as our resident specialist dietitian, could you quickly explain to the audience what PKU is?
Of course. So PKU is a rare genetic disorder that causes an amino acid called phenylalanine, or Phe for short, to build up in the body. So people with PKU need to follow a special diet that significantly restricts the intake of protein, which is found in many foods and beverages, and most foods and beverages. So the diet typically includes Phe-free protein substitutes and foods that are free from or low in Phe, and some of those protein substitutes can also be low in Phe. So if PKU is well managed, then people like our guest here today can live normal, active lives, which Annie is here to make the norm through her concept of Move with PKU. So, welcome to the VitaFriends Voices podcast, Annie.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. So just before we begin, could you tell us a little bit about yourself for the audience to get to know you?
Yeah, so I'm Annie, I'm 25. I've got PKU myself, classical PKU. I used to be on 14 exchanges. Now I'm on 30 exchanges as I'm on ciprofloxacin. I'm based in Birmingham, but I grew up in sort of near Leeds area.
And so just to pick up on that, I think just when we mention exchanges, some people might count it differently. So it is basically grams of protein.
Yeah, exactly.
Fab.
So Annie, if we can go back to the very beginning, and what has it been like growing up with PKU? Because I know how active you are. So can you just give us a bit of an outline about that?
Yeah, so growing up with PKU, my parents were very supportive of me, sort of very encouraging to sort of not let PKU stand in my way. Went to school, did all sort of after school clubs, like travelled, etc. But sort of really found my feet with athletics and got involved sort of in high school really. So in after school clubs and then the local Harriers. So I was training sort of basically nearly every day in summer in high school, which when you've got your GCSEs, so like exams, it's quite intense. And obviously growing it anyway. So, so I had quite a few, I'd say, had a positive experience with growing up with PKU and sort of, I say, travel with school, travel with family. And then, I got really involved in athletics with the Harriers. So I was competing. So my main events were sort of sprinting, hurdles, athletics in general. That was intense, trying to manage sort of exchanges, recovery, making sure you're eating enough to support that and making sure you've got enough food with you for competitions during the day. So you might have school and then you go out for either training session or you go out for competition in the afternoon. Trying to manage that was a bit of a juggle and a bit of a trial and error situation. It was a very positive experience. It led me to where I am today. And it was really a positive experience growing up with PKU. I'd say there were the struggles there, but in overall, it was a really good experience.
So is there one piece of advice you'd give people listening to this in terms of how you've managed it, you've achieved what you've achieved? Is there one piece of advice you'd give to?
Yeah, I'd say that PKU doesn't stop you from doing anything in terms of education, travelling, etc. It would probably just add another layer of another layer you have to think about, that pre-planning side of things. So I just say if you do want to do something, maybe just thinking ahead, reaching out for some support. So reaching out to dietitians, reaching out to family, friends, that extra pre-planning. I know myself, I can think of an example when I was in college and I had the opportunity, I was selected as one of 30 students to go abroad to teach PE and sport and volunteer in Malta for 3 weeks. And it was all funded and it was all done. And it was like, right, okay, how are we going to do this? It wasn't great sort of food-wise over there for PKU. So it just meant that there was a lot of pre-planning, a lot of taking food over there. but it didn't stop me from doing it. It just added that other layer of like complexity that people don't have to think about. So I think it doesn't stop you from doing something, but it just requires a bit more thinking.
So when you say that, when you go abroad particularly, how did you take all your protein substitute, your low protein foods? Did you do that or did you?
Yeah, I did that. On that particular occasion, we had extra luggage for sports equipment. Mine was all food and supplement, which was quite funny rocking up with that. But yeah, so I took my substitute at the time. I was on a liquid substitute. So it meant taking that in my hand luggage because I didn't want to get there and lose my case because then I'd have to come straight back. So taking that in your hand luggage, having the letter from the dietitian. In the past, we have rung security at the airport as well to let them know, rung the airlines. And usually they're fairly fine about it. Yeah, they have to scan everything, but supplements-wise, took all that with me. And then food-wise, on that particular occasion, we did take quite a lot with us. In my case, sort of, your low-protein pastas, things like that. My family had a bit of a mission, like making loads of low-protein foods and taking that with me, and it did actually travel quite well. Surprisingly, we've had a few instances where it hasn't. There's been curry sauce all over things, but that's fine. But yeah, so it's just making sure you're taking the things like the pasta and snacks with you that you might not have over there. And that particular occasion, it was quite an active holiday as well, so it was making sure I got things there available. It was ringing the hotel before, letting them know, which seemed to work fairly well, except the first day when I got given a hot dog that wasn't PKU. So there were some teething problems, but I think generally if you let people know beforehand, then they're not suddenly surprised when you come to the hotel and expect them for you to cook your pasta or cook something for you that's different from everybody else. So I think in other holidays I've been on, ringing the hotel that you're staying, or if you go into somewhere, taking your own, exploring the local supermarkets, a lot of fresh fruit and veg. So I think just having that pre-planning element throughout, whatever that is with PKU, it definitely does help. So you're not just guessing. I think it's just about pre-planning and being prepared. Definitely has helped with travelling.
So pre-planning is key.
Yes.
And it's really nice to hear that you've had a positive experience of growing up with PKU, isn't it? And it feels like you're taking that attitude into adulthood as well.
Yeah, I definitely think because, there are struggles there, but I think if you embrace it as much as you can, people will question me, people will ask questions, but generally it's, they're interested about your diet, interested how you manage it. They've never come across it before. And I think trying to put that angle on it, like, yes, I have to have this substitute, but that keeps me healthy. Or I have this diet, but that keeps me healthy, and understanding why. And I think the more you understand your PKU and accept it, because, you've got it, you might as well embrace it. But I don't think it should restrict you in terms of just because I've got PKU, I can't travel, I can't exercise, I can't go out, I can't go for meals, etc. I think, it's just trying to use that in a positive way, I think. Because I think it can, you could focus on the negatives, but that's not really going to get you anywhere.
No. But acknowledging that there are challenges too is important, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. It's not smooth sailing. It definitely hasn't been, but it's trying to think about it in more of a positive way overall.
And can you tell us a little bit more about your PhD?
Yeah, so I'm doing a PhD in Birmingham on PKU and sport, physical activity, nutrition, all that area really. But it stemmed from being sort of a young athlete with PKU. So having those struggles. So yes, I love my training, but afterwards I'd come in the car, I'd flop, I'd have no energy, I'd constantly be hungry, I'd constantly be tired. And there's only so much you can eat low protein wise, there's only so many supplements you could have. And it was frustrating. And I think from the get-go after every session and just feeling like that, it was going to your clinic, they can only help you so much, and there wasn't any information that I had access to on what to be doing. So again, it was very much trial and error. And I think that's kind of always fueled this desire to trying to find some answers and find some advice, not just for me, but for everyone with PKU. It wasn't just me being active. A lot of people, whether you've got PKU or not, are interested in sport. So I think, it kind of stemmed from that. And then I did my undergrad graduate degree in Newcastle in sport and exercise science. So I had that knowledge. And then my master's in exercise physiology. And then now I'm doing my PhD in PKU and sport at Birmingham. So it's trying to get as many answers as we can in the 3 years to try and get some better advice for how to manage PKU and exercise, physical activity. It's not just for, those that are really active into sport, but just general activity as well. And, walking, for instance, just, it's the big spectrum of activity and how that feeds into nutrition, how that feeds into recovery, that big aspect really. And yeah, so we're trying to find out some answers really for how to best manage it. We've got, as I said, a bit of a task to complete, but yeah, that's how I kind of came to where I am today.
Great. And I'm sure with your determination, you will smash it. So just to pick up on a couple of things then, you talked about sort of general sort of exercise. So if people are watching this, they're listening to it and they think, well, exercise, do they have to be doing a certain level of exercise, or is it just walking the dog to running or
yeah,
or is it
so
anything?
at the moment the PhD is covering like any sort of activity levels or not with PKU. So the first study tried to capture what people are doing, whether that's nothing, whether that's just your physical activity in sense of, walking the dog, some light activity, housework, gardening, that sort of stuff.
Okay.
Whether it's the exercise, whether it's like swimming, running, cycling, weights, gym, and whether it's like more of the higher end sports side of things. But I think what we're aiming to do is capture all of that and see what people are doing, what people are struggling with, and that kind of feeding into the rest of the research and focusing on what people are the main issues that are there or concerns and questions that are there. It will aim to try and cover, as I say, not just those that are really active. Obviously, we would like to get some information on those as well, but just sort of some general guidance that everybody can, if they do want to go to the gym a couple of times a week, or if they do want to do something more intense, like, training most days, and how do I support my diet to support my exercise and goals with that. So yeah, it's quite a lot to do, but it's trying to get everybody involved. It's not just you have to be Olympic level to do it, because it's definitely not that.
Brilliant. So if people want to get involved, how can they get involved?
So yeah, to get involved, we are now sort of starting the next study. So it will be more, the details are sort of still to be fully ironed out with that. But yeah, it will be trying to capture PKU patients of all different activity levels. So as I say, from sort of like low, medium, high activity levels. And it will be getting involved in exercise, and, we'll be monitoring different levels. So Phe levels, we'll be monitoring sleep, mood, things like that, just the whole symptom tracker. To get involved, as I say, I'm on Instagram, got emails out there. So just get in touch with me. It's anyone in the UK can get involved in this particular study. We have previous studies already out there that have sort of led into this one. So yeah, if you want to get involved, just reach out and get in touch with me and can provide more information.
Okay, and what is your Instagram handle?
Instagram is lifeofannie _kiss. Yeah, so just message me with that, and then yeah, I can give you some more information.
Great. And I think on that note as well, with your Instagram page, you're really inspiring people to move more regardless of their activity level, which is what your PhD is trying to showcase as well. And you've really coined this term of move with PKU. How did that come about?
Yeah, I really like the move with PKU aspect, and it did just come about one evening. I'd recently moved to Birmingham, I was thinking about the PhD. I think I'd had a few sort of initial meetings and it was all getting very exciting. And I just thought, this is great, but this is a long-term thing. So it's going to take me 3 years to do. What can I do now that can help someone just, get started with exercise, just rather than waiting for the research to come out? Because as I say, it takes time with these sort of things to get good quality research. And I thought, what can I do? And I was like, well, I don't know, let's start a hashtag move with PKU. And it sounds so simple, but just sat on my bed one evening thinking that's quite a good thing. And it was just, trying to get people with PKU active, just moving. And rather than waiting for recommendations to come out in 3+ years, it's actually, if I can just get people moving, they'll probably feel better, more in control, more like the mental and physical health side of things would probably improve as well. So again, it brings the community together around the world as well. So yeah, that's just kind of how it came about, and it's quite nice that it's kind of taken off a little bit.
Yes, because it sure brings people together, because people are using it. I've seen it on posts, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to see that. And yeah, as I say, it was not a very exciting story, but it did come around like that, just wanting people to, get a bit active and think, actually, I can still do this with PKU.
Yeah. And actually, just taking a couple of steps back. So you mentioned there before when you were talking about your PhD, I know that you've run some focus groups, and I don't know how much you can tell us yet, obviously. But you mentioned that you're trying to listen to people's concerns. And I guess just for our listeners and those who are watching, what are the main concerns at the moment for individuals with PKU when it comes to movement?
Yeah, I think there's been a number of things that have come up. And I think with both the focus groups and the surveys that have been out, I think a big issue is energy levels, that tiredness post-exercise. When people who are active engage in activity, I think that energy crashes are a real struggle for people, and trying to manage that with the diet and recovery, and just not feeling that they can recover as well as somebody without PKU and perform and go again. So I think that whole concept of energy crashes and why that's happening, and how to maybe support that better with nutrition as well, along with maybe seeing the science behind that. I think that's been a real sort of theme that's come up in both, which can be a barrier, as I say, to then continue with exercise or do it as regularly as they'd like to. And again, if someone does take part in exercise or activity and then feels this, they might think, I don't really want to do it again. So it's trying to reduce the level of tiredness, or maybe have an explanation of why as well, and how best to manage that, and whether, that's sort of tailoring your approach and like your energy levels day to day. So it's hopefully trying to build upon that and get a better way to manage that, because that has definitely come out within the focus groups and the surveys quite a lot. So it's definitely something that needs to be looked into more.
So Annie, this is absolutely fascinating and really interesting in terms of you're talking about your PhD and what you're hoping to find out. But can we just take a couple of steps back, and can you just sort of talk us through how your PhD became a reality with Vitaflo?
Yeah, really good question actually, because I had this idea, or I'd always had this interest in PKU and sport and the questions that I'd mentioned before. And after, when it was in my master's, coming towards the end of the master's, I was obviously thinking about what to do next. Do I go into a job? Do I do further study? So I was kind of had that idea, and anyway, I was applying for things and reached out to a few universities, just trying to get some initial ideas, and it wasn't really working for straight away after my master's. And I also thought, I don't think I want to go straight into it after doing sort of 4 years straight of uni. So I got into clinical work. So I was working in private healthcare for a year, well, just over a year, full time. And within that time, I was still thinking, actually, I'd really like to find this research out. So once I'd been there sort of over 6 months, I got back in touch with a couple of universities, and Birmingham had, I got in contact with Birmingham, and they said, I kind of proposed the idea of what I'd like to do, and they kind of run it by their sports science department and accepted. They were like, yes, this is a great project. However, we can't fund it. So it'd have to be either externally funded or yourself. And I thought, well, that's one box ticked. I've got the university, I've got Birmingham, great location. So then I kind of was like, right, went back, had some help from Anita McDonald, and got in touch with her thinking, right, I've got this potential PhD, but is there any chance what's the best route to get funding? So again, got some contacts, and Anita put me in touch with Tricia. And so from there I kind of had a conversation with Tricia. So this is what I'd like to do. This is what I've done in my past. This is my background. We had a discussion, really positive one, and sort of put together a proposal, which was then sent to Tricia and Vitaflo. And it all kind of went from there, really. And that's how it was. So it started off as a little idea, little teenage old me competing, and it kind of came into reality of, actually, I'm now doing a PhD at Birmingham, where it all began. So it was incredible. And with the support of Trisha and Vitaflo as well.
So maybe just to mention there that Trisha is our head of research and development, but she's also one of the pioneers in PKU when it comes to dietetics. So in fact, she was one of the first people in the UK to advise on the low protein diet, which is really exciting. And then also just Anita MacDonald probably doesn't need an introduction, but she is a consultant dietitian, or she's a professor, I should say, at Birmingham. And so you sort of mentioned what you would like to get out of your PhD. Is there anything that you have experienced in your own journey that you think, I suppose, healthcare professionals who might be listening or patients who might be listening, like that they, could benefit from or change in clinical practice?
Yeah, I think one thing that was frustrating as a patient was going to clinic. Everything else was fairly fine. My levels were stable. I didn't really have many concerns. The only question I had was, how do I support my nutrition with activity? Why am I feeling like this? Do I need more supplement? Do I need more exchanges? And every time sort of them going, don't really know, like can't really advise you. And it got to the point where you kind of stopped really asking the question because you just weren't going to get the answers. And it wasn't their fault. They're not sports scientists. They don't know. They're dietitians and they can only help to an extent. And even, as time's gone on, I've had a little bit more support with dietitians and currently now. And I think it's just having them answers that dietitians can either refer you to. So whether that's some sort of other clinic, whether that's a sort of information post or whatever that may be, it's trying to support dietitians because, it's not their fault. It's not something they should be trained in. So maybe I should have a bit more training in or answers in that area. But as a specialist, that should be potential separate. And I think it's having that conversation in clinic just to start with. And then, if there's somewhere else they can signpost patients to, I think that would be really beneficial. And I think it's having that evidence out there for clinicians and healthcare professionals just to have more conversations about it. And yes, it is PKU, it is about the diet, but, exercise and activity can help with so many other aspects. It can help with the mental well-being side of things, any potential comorbidities. So I think it's something that needs to be recognised more and on sort of a higher priority. And it's just being able to, get that information so clinicians are sort of more knowledgeable, but obviously confident in being able to talk to patients and maybe signpost them to somewhere that can have further information. So from a patient perspective, I think having that in clinic and having more access to things maybe outside of clinic, so more focus in activity in general, whether that's with the NSPKU, whether that's with local events that are more physical activity focused than just the diet. I think that would be really engaging with the community. And I think from a patient, that would have been helpful when growing up with PKU, being active as well, being sort of an athlete. And even today, I'm still running. So it would be beneficial for sort of all ages. It's not just childhood.
Mm.
Annie, I'm absolutely fascinated to hear the fact that you're a runner, because I'm a very keen runner myself. So how has PKU impacted on your running?
Yeah, so great question. I completely shifted from athletics and sprinting sort of post-COVID really into sort of endurance running. My housemate at the time was training for a marathon and I just joined her in for a few runs and kind of picked it up from there. Decided to sign up for the Great North Run. So I gave myself 10 weeks to train for that. Did my first half marathon, which was a challenge. And really surprised myself, did it and thought, right, that's that done. Done that on the bucket list, won't do any more. That was silly. I got the running bug. So
let's be honest, it's an addiction, isn't it?
It is definitely. So now we're sort of 4 half marathons later, a couple of 10Ks. So however, it's very different to manage endurance running versus sprinting. It's, again, I struggle with the energy crashes still, especially on long run days. It's trying to get that fuel in. Carbohydrates are a big one. So there's a lot about protein substitute, but carbohydrates when you're doing long distance running are a real big one, even like 24 hours after a race. So I've done a few half marathons in the summer, and it's, again, just trying to manage your nutrition around that. And I think that can definitely be a potential barrier for somebody who maybe just starts with running and getting involved. Even I still feel it at like a 5K, for instance. It's still a decent run, and you have to fuel for that both before and after. And I think based on some of the previous research that's been that I've done already in terms of the focus groups, I think other patients have experienced barriers such as the energy crashes, such as, not feeling they can fuel their performance or recover quick enough compared to non-PKU peers, not feeling that they have that same ability, or maybe, the ability to sort of recover or perform to the same or better standard. And I can resonate with that. It is hard. I mean, luckily, thankfully, being on a bit more natural protein has helped, I think, with the energy, but it's still there. And I think it's really trying to have that conversation in clinic about how best to manage that. I think that's really helped me, having the support of a dietitian that's very interested in sport. And I think having more information around that from the PhD would be really beneficial, because I think there's a little bit of disconnect between what patients perceive as barriers and the different barriers they have. Very much PKU related in terms of the energy, the nutrition, trying to logistically manage it. So patients feel that they can't train in the morning because they've got to, have the breakfast, have the substitute, and then, they're not feeling that they want to go out on a run because they've just had the protein substitute because they're feeling very full and bloated. So it's like logistical challenges that potentially some healthcare professionals are unaware of, let alone the diet and the timing and the preparation for that. So I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between what the patients have reported and healthcare professionals thinking, there's no barriers, it's just the same as everybody else, like time and, just general like life being busy. And I think it's trying to get what the patients are saying across to clinicians. However, granted, if they've not got time in clinic to talk about it, the healthcare professionals aren't going to know about it. So it's trying to just have more of an open conversation about that and the research there to support it and help people, really.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you don't know what you don't know. It's the same for patients, the same for healthcare professionals, anyone. It was quite interesting there. You mentioned that it's all about fueling right. It's about recovery. And I know it's about fluid as well, getting enough hydration. So perhaps if we look at it, in a practical sense, I guess, what do you do in order to feel your best and fuel your best as well for movement?
Yeah, exactly. I think personally, I've kind of learned through trial and error. It's very individual in terms of that, but some sort of, general guidance. I used to suffer quite a bit with headaches after a long run, and I was like, I'm not drinking enough. And I realised I was drinking like a fish. I was drinking plenty, but I needed actually electrolytes that I wasn't having. So I started introducing just electrolyte tablets into my water when I finished a run. And that kind of solved the problem straight away. I was monitoring my bloods at the same time. I did a 24-hour sort of blood, like 6 blood spots to see that my levels were, 200-300, they were fine. So I was like, well, it's not my levels. I'm drinking enough, I'm eating enough. So what is it? So it was electrolyte. So you can't always just say it's one thing. It's not just I need more protein substitutes. It's trying to get the whole approach of nutrition. So that one thing for me was a big thing, the electrolytes, especially after a long run, and carbohydrate intake as well. So making sure I'm hitting what I need to be hitting in terms of how much running I'm doing a week to fuel that. Because if I wasn't hitting enough carbs, I was, waking up hungry or not feeling tired, feeling sleepy. Even though my levels might have been okay, I just wasn't fueling myself properly. And it's keeping that both before a race. So if I got a race coming up, understanding that a few days before to try and up my carbohydrates more, it was a struggle. And I think sometimes a bit too much of a struggle. It's a lot of food you have to eat. And, even with more protein allowance in natural protein, it's still difficult to try and get that in. So yeah, just little things like that definitely help, and making sure my standard breakfast and having that, don't do anything different on race days, you do in a normal run. And then when I'm running as well, if it's a long run, I'd take, because I can't have jelly babies, got gelatin in them. I wasn't like the idea of having gels because I have enough protein substitute, things like that. So I either have dates when I'm running or like sweets, like gel sweets, just to help me keep energized. So it's just little things like that you kind of learn through trial and error, learn the hard way. And I think it is dependent on sport. So when I go to the gym, within half an hour of finishing, I'll have 20 grams of protein substitute straight away, and that will that helps me. Again, if you have that with food, that's usually better as well. So I think just little tips like that have definitely helped me in my recovery. And then making sure I get enough sleep, that's a real big one. Knowing if I've done a long run and I want to exercise the next day, or if I just want to recover well, or if I've been to the gym or whatever exercise, I need my sleep. Even if I've just been on a walk, I need my sleep. Like it's quite funny actually. But yeah, I definitely do recover a lot with sleep. So yeah, that's a few tips that I do really.
And I think that's absolutely fascinating and really interesting, because I think it goes back to what Kit was saying earlier in terms of your inspiration, in terms of, that's what a lot of runners will do. So the fact you're sort of putting that advice out there will appeal to a whole population, which I think is brilliant, so thank you for that. And also as well, what races have you got in the future?
Well, that's a big question. I've probably signing up for the Nottingham Half Marathon next September. I think that's going to be a yearly one.
Okay, good.
Used to live there when I did my clinic work, so I have my old club there, so I will be probably going to see them again. Probably do the Birmingham Half as well.
Right, okay. So I'm running the Birmingham Half as well, Annie. So should we do it together?
Sounds like a good option.
Fantastic.
I'll see you on the start line.
Brilliant.
I'll be on the sideline, not the start line.
We need the support.
Yeah, we need the support, Kit, so you can come and cheer us on.
Cheering you on.
We'll hold you to that.
Fab. Okay. Well, we always end our episode on one question. So if you had a crystal ball, how would you like to see the management of PKU be in the future?
Okay, good question. I think if I could see into the future, I would like all patients across the world, not just in the UK, to have access to information on how to manage their PKU with any sort of physical activity, exercise and nutrition, so it wasn't a barrier for them to take part, and that they could do whatever sporting aspirations that they have and still manage their PKU in control, basically.
Lovely.
Annie, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
And to our listeners, if you like this episode, please like and subscribe to this podcast and share with anyone you think might benefit from tuning in. Thank you for joining our vibrant community of VitaFriends, and for more information, please visit our VitaFriends website. And we really look forward to seeing you on the next episode.